Critical Black diaspora theorists, I'm calling you. Queer futurists, I'm calling you. This is for those of us who live here at the shoreline. Alexis Gumbs. She also knew, as she had always known these things, how those two managed to fly. Woman, when we met on the solstice high over halfway between your world and mine, rimmed with full moon and no more excuses, your red hair burned my fingers as I spread you, tasting your rough down to sweetness. And I forgot to tell you. The very word erotic comes from the Greek word eros, the personification of love and all its aspects. The place, she said, where they and many others who resemble them, all of them with filthy hands, will pry you apart. I dream of a place between your breasts, to build my house like a haven, where I plant crops in your body, an endless harvest, where the commonest rock is moonstone and ebony opal, giving milk to all of my hungers, and your night comes down upon me like a nurturing rain. When I speak of the erotic, then I speak of it as an assertion of the life force of women. The erotic is a measure between the beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings. The erotic has often been misnamed by men and used against women. Rising out of that darkness, hot darkness, up, out, over the black water, so much water, then down, down into it, feeling, hands, now breathing water, awakening. For this is, yes, it is, the oldest water of our longing. Here, back there. So in Gumbs' work about the shoreline that was written in Audre Lorde's Litany for Survival, she talks about living at a boundary that you can't cross, and we try to represent that as much, especially with water, because it was a big symbol in our film as far as like the transatlantic, and especially with boundaries and thinking of Stephen or patriarchy or cultural norms as the shoreline that blocked Jasmine and TT's characters from really having the relationship that they wanted. So we try to incorporate that as much and think about those boundaries that block us. And me as an actor, we talk about super objective or what your character wants, and we try to incorporate that as much with Thieving Sugars and thinking about what does it mean for a woman to love a woman in the Caribbean, and really holding that as like the main question of our film, and trying to portray that as much, and giving those tools to the actor to think about these things while they're in their scenes, and while they're really focused on their partner. Yeah.
One of the things that kind of helped me get more into character was just thinking about the Thieving Sugar, the Tinsley piece, when she talks about what does it mean for a woman to love another woman in the Caribbean. to me, that question was so profound. And when we talked about that in class, I remember when we had to work on the tableaus. And what was very inspiring, which I think led Stephen to kind of be the male character in our film with the love interest, was the tableau that Faith and he did, and the other people who were in that group. And it was just kind of like everybody, Faith was the object of desire, and Stephen, she didn't even know. See, she really didn't want to be with Stephen, but you know, so in this case, Stephen really wants to be with me, and I don't want to be with him. I want to be with TT. And I think really just in reflecting on the question, just what does it mean to love another woman in general is like a good question to just ask yourself, because it's not even just in the Caribbean. I think that it's just a question that can be asked universally, and that's just kind of what helped me get more into character for this scene.
I have a question. So how would you answer if someone said, what does it mean for a black woman to love another black woman?
Oh, that's a very, very profound question. I would probably say that I think it just means the same thing as any woman loving another woman, just because I think that a lot of times we'll restrict ourselves just because of race and even gender as well. So I think it just means the same thing. You know, it just means you love that person. There's no like boundaries in love. You know.
Great. Thank you.
Gumbs' shoreline inspired me as a filmmaker and also inspired our film, um, especially in the way that she called out. For instance, she said, for those of us who write, read, and live the poetic as a radical practice of collaborative creation, these Black feminist poets offer an inspirational archive with which to engage as readers and practitioners of poetry, generating a definition of poetry that turns the reproduction of language into life itself. I think that inspired me because we could have made any kind of film, but for this class particularly, and for what we thought should be put out into the world, we decided to make a film about Black feminist queerness. And I think that Gumbs' call to arms per se for people who create art to make alternative forms and to cross that shoreline that was blocking us before really spoke to me as a filmmaker, and I hope that it came across in our film and in our thesis and through the research that we did, because I think it was very important for us to break norms and really cross the shoreline, I guess.